Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Reina Creole, bringing you that spice to sci-fi and pop culture analysis. And welcome to the after school special, where we get together with some folks we can't quite meet at lunchtime. So you know what? We meet them after school. And this is the third in a series for one of my the favorite for me, Star Trek series. And of course, that is Deep Space Nine. And you know, when we talk Deep Space Nine, we've got Meyer Burnett on the show with us. So let me bring up my co-host and bring up Robert as well. Hello.
Oh, I love these streams. I'm so happy that you invited me back, because if there's, it's talking about Star Trek I really love is so refreshing.
I know. It's just like, you just like what?
Sorry. I was gonna say, I just like looking at your guys' eyes and giving my simping comments for about 60 seconds, because it makes you guys blush and turn red and smile. And I'm done. It's very awkward, and the chat's like, "Shut up, Steven. Let's get to Robert Meyer."
Yeah, it's just cool.
It's all good.
Yeah. Because it's good. It's good stuff. We love you too fast, Steven. I mean, I was like working today. It was like a long ass day, but I had like Deep Space Nine episodes running like on my iPad next to my workstation. I'm just looking and I'm like, I remember when I was excited about Star Trek. Mm-hmm. You know, like genuinely, what great stuff, are we gonna see, this week. And it's like I miss having that, that particular feeling.
I will say one thing though with season 3, though, especially with this one, we get introduced to a brand new character. It's one of my favorite characters, and it's Sisko's goatee.
I'm like,
because honestly, when you get through all the other seasons later on, the goatee's there and the shaved head eventually comes. Dude, the goatee, when you don't see it on the previous seasons, you're like sitting there going, what's with the baby face? I don't like this. This is not right. He doesn't look like Sisko in a way. It's like the beard was meant to be there.
He had to have more Hawk in him.
Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence that I truly plugged in to Deep Space Nine in season 3. And now that I think about it, probably was because of the goatee.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things about Deep Space Nine is I think the first 3 seasons, it had a bit of an identity crisis. Uh-huh. It was really trying to, not like it had to be good, because there was good episodes and I love the pilot. We talked about that. I loved Emissary, and Duet and In the Hands of the Prophets are great episodes that really kick off the mythology of Deep Space Nine. And season 2 had that 3-parter that it opened with. Season 3, they made some changes. I mean, obviously, they made Cisco look a little bit more badass. We got the Defiant. In that first,
yeah,
you
the
know,
Defiant showing up.
Which, you know, I also miss the days when a new Starfleet ship would get introduced that was truly badass, that looked beautifully designed, that had something really interesting going on. I don't know what's happened to Star Trek ship design over the last 12 years, but man, the Defiant, which sort of broke convention. You know, it didn't have round nacelles. The nacelles were sort of built into the ship, and you know, it was built to fight the Borg. That's what its mythology was, and it just looked badass. You know, and the fact that they gave them a ship to run around in, and we opened with a 2-part episode right after the second season finale, the Jem'Hadar, when they blew up a Galaxy class ship. Shit was going to go down, and it was very, very cool. I mean, we knew that the stakes had been raised going into this season, and we didn't know quite how. But there was 2 really, really great 2-parters in this season. Actually, 3 good 2-parters, I would say. The season opener, the Search Part 1 and 2. Then we have Past Tense, and then The Probable Cause and The Die is Cast, which is epic.
It is.
And
the thing, sorry, I didn't mean to
go ahead.
You were talking about the Defiant, and they're like, we're getting introduced to not only something that we've never seen in Starfleet before. It generally, like in our timing from the generation, is a warship. And that's why it was built to be the Borg. Starfleet doesn't deal with war or warships. They don't have a specifically designed warship. And was also something else that we introduced. It was the first time ever another race loaned a cloaking device to the Federation to be used.
That's what tripped me out when you saw the Romulan and it was like a cloaking device. I'm like, okay, what did I miss? Because if you've watched Star Trek for years, you know that something must have really, really, really gone down. But we knew how desperate things were at the end of season 2. So while it made sense, still that, holy crap, we got a cloaking device and the Romulans are okay with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that after the Borg and now the Dominion, this was a completely unknown force. And what's really interesting is season 3 is when it really begins. The commentary, people have always said to me, well, Rob, season 3 of Deep Space Nine is when the show really starts to depart from the utopian ideals Roddenberry set up. And my answer to that is no. This is when people with utopian ideals now have to come to grips with something they never wanted, which was an oncoming galactic conflict with a perhaps superior force of shapeshifters that are hell-bent on destroying what they've created in the Alpha Quadrant. And what do? How do good people face that kind of adversity? And I think that still is part of Gene Roddenberry's ideal. It's not like in the original Star Trek, they didn't step into civilizations where they were having not galactic conflicts, but conflicts between planets or whatever. So this is setting up something we hadn't seen before. It's not like the Borg, which is more like a plague of locusts. This is an actual very intelligent, very dangerous race of shapeshifters that don't like solids very much, and for good reason, because they have a lot of reason to be distrustful of solids. And their solution is like, well, we're stronger now than you, and we'd rather just not have you around because we know what it's like to have you kinds of people, and we're going to get rid of you first. And they weren't wrong.
It also showed a different type of warfare because the Dominion was sneaky. They didn't actually have to go out and cause conflict. They had the ability to manipulate and cause dissent within the Federation. If we're looking at diecast in general, when we had the Tal Shiar, and I can never remember the Klingon one, not the Klingon one, the Cardassian one. They teamed up and they set up that team.
The Obsidian Order.
The Obsidian Order. Thank you. And I just watched that episode, and they had them team up just to take out a force that would literally cause them harm. And they were doing it tactfully. They were taking out the strongest first and then going down the ranks, especially when you see later on how they get on Earth. And that's when it starts. I'm sorry, I said too much.
Well, no, I mean, it's also like what's going on now. We have foreign bad actors using hacking and using cyber attacks against us. I mean, we're essentially fighting a proxy war with foreign powers that can support these kinds of hackers and say, oh, it's not us, but they're literally attacking our infrastructure. I mean, and you don't need to launch a large scale assault against someone on this planet anymore. You just disrupt their infrastructure and their banking systems and their power grids via hacking. And that's the kind of asymmetric warfare we're in the midst of right now. Whether it's with China or with Iran or with the former Soviet Union, with Russia.
Right. It's like the tactics have changed. Kind of reading what Shane Nolan here says. Roddenberry Trek had wars, several of them in the Federation before the original series. It's like, yeah, he did. But with DS9, it's like it was on steroids. We were seeing adversaries that we hadn't seen before. Just with using different tactics that, the Federation really was not used to. And they needed to adjust extremely quickly. So it was just when you thought that, you had one threat to deal with, with the Jem'Hadar, then it's like more started coming and more started coming. It's just like, holy crap, this is great.
The other thing was we had a point where this is no longer like when Q sent the Enterprise to meet the Borg for the first time. It wasn't like the Locust or a Plague that were eventually going to show up within we'll throw it 359 as everyone knows the battle. We were seeing an invasion from another quadrant, a quadrant that has been set and controlled by a certain type of species and the way their whole system worked. And by the time it got to DS9, they were pretty much the forefront. They were like the trenches. They controlled the wormhole, but they also controlled the ability for peace. And the Dominion didn't really want peace. They wanted servitude, in my opinion.
Yes, no, they did. And they did because they had learned in their section of the galaxy what had happened with the solids versus shapeshifters and the kind of animosity and distrust that was fostered between those two kinds of beings, and they just didn't want to deal with it. Now that you're going to come into our space and we have the wormhole here, we got to do something about it. And they decided to. And the funny thing about it was they weren't necessarily wrong, And I think that's something that remained always, that they kept. Again, they never made anyone mustache twirling villains, and what they did with Dukat and Damar, with the Cardassian and the Zenkethi and the Breen and all these people, the alliances were being made and people were trying to protect their own, and it was always very interesting how they dealt with this conflict that we see bubbling up during the third season of this show. So it was.
Sorry,
go ahead.
You mentioned Dukat, and right away the first thing that pops in my head is the hilarity when it came to civil defense on how he's like, they had all the subroutines going in. Like, he's all pompous, like, hey, I'm here to save the day. I don't know what's going on. I'll take some red leaf tea. What do you mean all my subroutines are gone? Okay, duck.
I did not see that twist coming, and that's kind of one of the things that I really liked about this show. How it's like they lead you one way and then lead you the other way. It's like, who would have thought, okay, we knew the Cardassians were ruthless, but to make it to a point where if Dukat showed up, that all of his codes were invalid, and now he was the one whose ass was on the line along with everyone else's. It's like, yeah, you're going to get screwed over as much as we are right now. I didn't see that coming, and it just totally, you had to laugh.
No, and it was good. I mean, the way it's funny. A lot of people talk about, obviously, Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine. And I think one of the great things about Babylon 5 was to see the development of Jakar, the character of Jakar that Andreas, Commander Tomalak, our favorite Romulan in Next Generation, but how he played Jakar. And we saw that the Narn ambassador, and we saw the change that he made over the course of the series from being sort of an antagonist to being this noble man, or noble Narn. And we did see a lot of that same shift in Dukat. Like, he started out as a villain, and you think he's going to be a caring, good guy, and then he just turns tail and becomes bad, and then he becomes possessed. So he's worse. And I really, Mark Alamo, one of my favorite things about Deep Space Nine was always his performance. He was so great in the show.
Oh my gosh, he was awesome.
he flipped more sides than poker chips at a casino. No offense, but like every time there's like, oh, the provisional government fell. Okay, I'm on the civilian government. Well, civilian government fell. Okay, I'm back to the Dominion government. Oh, Dominion fell. Oh, okay, Klingon ship, hide cloak, protect civilians. He was all over the place.
He was, but I kind of get. I didn't understand it then, but I kind of understand it now because going back, like researching my family's history, like my sixth great grandfather. Okay, he's a Florida-born Spaniard, right? When after the 7 Years' War ended and the British were taking over, and they were telling the Spaniards, get out or go someplace else. My sixth great grandfather stayed. The rest of the family went to Cuba. Him and a couple of other Spaniards bought up all the property. They became British citizens. Why? Because they knew that they had the power at that time. And then then they were supplying the Americans at the same time. So when they were capturing, the Patriots and Spaniards and putting them in the fort, fort here, he was taking supplies to them. The British governor didn't like it, but it's like, what are you going to do? I supply you with beef and supplies. What are you going to do? You're going to starve, right? If you don't let me do what I'm going to do. So after that ended, the Americans came in. Hey, guess what? This is great. This is great. Spain's, ruling over Florida again. I'm glad to have my original, ruler back. And then eventually Spain, sold it. He flipped. Hey, I'm glad to be American now. So it was he read what was going on, and it's like it's always what's in my best interest. And Ducat is kind of like that. It's like, what's in my best interest right now? Okay, yeah. I'll do this right now.
Script Doctor makes a good point too. Fear and the faults of acting out of desperation are my favorite themes explored in DS9. Yeah,
it's like when the crap goes down, what are you going to do?
Oh, and that really, and that affects everybody on the show as it moves into seasons 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's one of the things that's so great about it. War compromises everyone's souls, and I love that.
It's like I always think of the Ferengi saying. It's like, peace is good for business. Also, war is good for business. And It's interesting, those two, where it's just like no matter which one it is, you need to be able to kind of adjust and roll with that.
That's right. It's all good stuff.
Especially when you mentioned Quark. Quark had a lot of episodes this season, especially when he had
House of Quark.
You mentioned Galron's face. House of Quark. Quark. It just looks like I don't even want to say this. I love Galron in that one. It's so good.
Just with that, I just one of the things that I really liked about Deep Space Nine is how they fleshed out the Ferengi. Now, Quark didn't go, into, one-to-one battle and whatever. He went through the financial records. And they're and he's telling them which spreadsheet on which tab to go to. And the Klingons are like, what? And Galron's like, no, I freaking had enough. But that was just funny seeing how he found this way out to help Groka, and she's like, okay, fine, I'll just go with it. But just in his own way. You gotta love Quark. He was a survivor.
And there's a lot of good Quark episodes this season too. Stuff like Family Business, Profit Motive. I liked Quark, what they did with him this season. Even in the first or the second part of the search, where he has to go to the Klingon homeworld.
Hi, Thomas. Oh, you've never seen Deep Space Nine? Dude, you should check it out.
Yeah.
When you get a chance. I really think you like it.
Although it is, I have to say, watching seasons 1 and 2 and 3, it can get a little, as much as I love Deep Space Nine, it can get a little monotonous in a way. Because it really changes when you get to season 4 and the season 4 opener, and it's interesting because when they finally decide to go into this long-running galactic conflict that ran 4 seasons, it really changed the show. And like season 3 to me is a transitional point where half the episodes are good and half are just kind of eh. But there's a lot of great stuff to be had in this season.
One of my favorite parts is when we're going back to the whole the Grand Nagus and he's coming by, but he's not the same Grand Nagus. We got an actual introduction to the Ferengi used to be actually more giving and more understanding and fair when it came to before profit and with profit. And you're seeing Quark slowly losing his mind. He's licking the new rules of acquisition. He's trying to find codes within the way, frustrated as hell. And he's just going, dude, just let it go.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable. Yeah, this was the season where we met Moogie, right?
Yep.
I loved her.
Family Business.
Mm.
That was toward the end of the season. It aired on my birthday.
Really?
Yeah. But what I loved about this is you had a kind of a combination of episodes, and then they would do like the great two-parter past tense when they find themselves in basically 2024 San Francisco and the homeless camps there. We're not too probably the two most prophetic episodes of Star Trek ever made. We're there. We're right there. And Bashir and Cisco being back in time in 2024 San Francisco with Jadzia, those are great. Those episodes, you watch them now and you're like, well, they nailed that one. Even down to the date.
Yeah. That episode, that is the two-parter that really made me sit down and watch and fully invest in Deep Space Nine. Because I'm just like, I haven't seen an episode like this. Like, granted, the original series, I did not see The City on the Edge of Forever before I saw this.
Right.
So when I went back and saw that, I'm kind of like, oh, what's kind of reminds me a little bit of past tense, but not really. But I thought that was really cool. But yeah, with the social issues, because you had Star Trek was always this ideal, like there's enough resources for everybody. But then Deep Space Nine, you start to see what happens when there is scarcity of resources. And you think that Earth has their crap together, but you really hadn't gone back and seen exactly what happened and what was the mess that had to get cleaned up eventually. And that's what happened, with past tense. It was just, it was just great. And Bashir's line where he's basically telling Cisco, but acting as if, you pretend not to care. And Cisco basically says it's not that people don't care. They just feel that the social problems are too big for them to solve.
Oh, and post-COVID even becomes more resonant. If you watch it now, it seems like these camps were created also to keep people in because of the extra added COVIDness of it all. And it's pretty prophetic, like a lot of great science fiction is. But and also what was so great about it is you see our characters split apart. Bashir and Cisco are in one place and Jadzia is in another, and they're both trying to work to figure out what they're going to do. And of course, it comes together, and they're trying to preserve the timeline. So it's a really great time travel story, but it's also a great social commentary story that gets. I mean, even without them, forget the time travel element, they find themselves in a situation that literally becomes. I mean, it's a standoff with the authorities. So it works in that way. It works on multiple different levels. It's great Star Trek.
The best thing, I think it was Bashir that quoted, I think it was past tense too, is like, how did they let this get so bad? And at that point, it's like it hits you in a way you start looking not only at the reality that you live in, but how much we are heading down that road. And it's still not too big now. It's just nobody does care. Or the people that do care is the voice is too small for anything to actually enact that change. And the baby steps need to become strides. And they were giving us a show of how it can happen.
I would kind of go with like what Cisco said. It's not that no one doesn't care. It's just that for some people, they feel that it's too big for them. And that's kind of like the difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, and what I find really strange now is like today is a perfect example. On one hand, today, July 20th is the 52nd anniversary of America landing on the moon. We had Jeff Bezos, who is one of the richest men in the world, not because he inherited this great wealth, because he had an idea. 25 years ago, he created this thing. I'm going to sell books through the internet. And you see what entrepreneurship and what having a new and unique idea based on the new technology at hand can lead to. And, a lot of people, there's a lot of complaints about, he's a billionaire, he doesn't pay taxes. I mean, he just gave Van Jones $100 million today to go do with whatever he sees fit.
Yeah.
And he gave someone else $100 million too. Like, here you go, go. So it's not like he and his ex-wife aren't doing their part. And how many people does Amazon employ around the world? You can get all cynical about it. But on the other hand, the guy is he's putting his money where his mouth is, and he's space research. The byproducts of that disseminate through our culture in ways that are incalculable. And how about all the new generation of people that like, I want to go work for SpaceX, or I want to go work for Blue Origin, or I want to go vote or go work for Virgin Galactic, because the reaches of space, they're forging a brand new industry that are going to put people to work for the next 100 years, assuming we make it.
Absolutely, because I know one of the things that was disheartening about NASA, and I worked there as a research assistant for a while, was that when they shut down the shuttle program, it was like that was it.
Right.
You had just like we had basically ride shotgun, with the Russians to get to the International Space Station. It just seemed like American space exploration was dead. Then you had companies like SpaceX come in, fire up all that infrastructure that had been mothballed, because that whole area where the Kennedy Space Center is on the Space Coast, space program used to employ thousands of people. And then that went away. Now you have SpaceX coming up, and they're doing things to the point where it's just like they haven't seen that kind of activity since that period in time.
No, and you've got three competing big private. I mean, of course, people can get cynical about it and go, well, both Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic are about space tourism. And I'm like, well, how long do you think that's going to last? Once they have reusable rockets, I mean, the capsule that went up today was the 15th time it was sent aloft. The first time with human beings in it. I mean, when you watch that it's so funny to me that our civilization's all about making penis jokes when it comes to the look of that spacecraft. But it's like when you watch that thing go up and land, and the landing gear comes down and it sets down. I mean, the technology involved and the where we've come is unbelievable. I can't wait to see where it goes in the next 20 years. And yet on the flip side of that, we have people who are questioning science every single day, and the funny thing is you can't question science if you want to go into space. It's very cut and dried. You either know your science or you're dead. And so, we have yet another example of how incredible the technology we have at our disposal is. We watched two different companies go into orbit over the last week. And, you can be cynical about it, sure. But you can also look at it and go, this is an astonishing achievement where we've come in such a short period of time when it comes to space research. And, people might say it might have been a publicity stunt, but taking 82-year-old Wally Funk, part of the women, the Mercury 13, and taking her into space was pretty damn cool. I mean, I know it's a symbolic gesture, but come on, man. How many young girls might look at that and wonder, who is Wally Funk? Why is her name Wally Funk?
Exactly. I didn't know who she was. As far as I knew, with the space program, even when I was there and they take me, to headquarters and all that other stuff. And, about the Apollo program, the Gemini program, all of that. I have never heard a woman's name mentioned at all. Women connected to the space program. I knew about some of them who were engineers, and they kind of did stuff in the background. Then, of course, you saw the story about Hidden Figures, which I actually did know about some of them. But a female astronaut, no. That was like no one said a word about it.
A whole female astronaut program. There was 13 women in that program, and they basically scrapped it because even back in the early 60s, they're like, women can't go into space. Well, you just watch one of them go into space today, and it was pretty amazing. So,
script doctor, because the private sector can do it because taxpayers funded the initial experiments. Yeah, actually, they did, and then once our space program got mothballed, it's like all that research, even though it did flow into other things in the market, of course, like cellular phones, all that technology or whatever, but firing that back up, they went back to that research and plussed it up. But yeah, you're right. There was an initial taxpayer outlay.
Yeah, I mean, but there had to be, because the taxpayers there was no other way to fund government operations, and that's what NASA was doing. And of course, you can also say that the only reason we did it was to beat the Russians to the moon, which is true.
Very true.
That's absolutely true.
That was real.
But I mean, it was also that same time that gave birth to Star Trek. Star Trek debuted 3 years before we landed on the moon, and while it was actually just right after it had gone off the air, I believe, we landed on the moon. So, the era of space was ushered in, and then people don't remember, but we haven't been back to the moon since 1972.
No, all that stuff is still there. It's still there. Hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Without the space program, we never would have gotten Tang.
we wouldn't have had handheld hair dryers either.
Nope. No Velcro. No microcircuits. None of that stuff.
I did share something quickly, just in case anyone wants to look back at female astronauts. I did find a list on Wiki. Actually, they're called spacefarers at this point. But yeah, there is quite a big list. And if we're actually looking, it goes all the way back to 1937. It's not just showing U.S., it's showing all of them.
Yeah.
Look at them. That is a lot. I remember, yeah. Roberta
Yeah, especially modern, because it's like when I'm thinking, like when I say female astronauts, I'm thinking of like Apollo era, Gemini era, like the Soviet, like the space race era. But once the shuttle program launched, started to get off the ground, we saw a lot more female astronauts.
Well, and we've got people like right now, the UAE, China, and the Americans have a probe at Mars. The China and America has a lander, and the UAE has an orbiter in orbit around Mars. I mean, this is astonishing. And let's hope that we will all move forward some way together, because obviously fighting wars with arms and weapons, that's not going to lead anywhere.
No.
The way the world is now so interconnected, it would be truly disastrous if we had another world war. But I think that space technology is definitely something that we should be focusing on, because it's an endless frontier. It's
absolutely.
But I mean, I think that's what Deep Space Nine started to do this season was it sort of, obviously the drums of war were beating, and yet they still had episodes like Past Tense, which were complete Star Trek social commentary that were really pretty much not a part of the ongoing mythology with the Dominion War. They did a great two-parter about social problems on Earth those two episodes have become more relevant than ever before.
They do.
Absolutely. Well, MJ1, sorry, Stephen, I'm going to get this super chat really quick. MJ1 Media for $5. Thank you so very much for that super chat. I appreciate it. There's one thing that always gets me when watching Star Trek 4, the Challenger Memorial in the opening. Never saw the incident, but it gets me. Dude, I actually saw the first shuttle launch after the Challenger incident. And it was really moving, because it's like we were finally getting back, into space. And I remember hearing when the Challenger explosion happened, a bunch of us who our dream was to work for NASA. That's what we wanted to do. We're just like, okay, this isn't going to happen. I guess it's over. It's not going to happen. It's just amazing how many kids at the time put Star Trek and the space program together. But eventually it got back up and running. And guess what? They came up with the Enterprise. And yes, I've actually been inside the Enterprise.
I was watching the Challenger liftoff live. It was in the morning. I was in college, and I was at the Evergreen State College, and my friend Chuck Bender, we had our dorm rooms, and it was an A dorm at Evergreen, if you know A dorm, the tallest dorm, and you'd have your room, and then we were connected by a bathroom. And so we were in Chuck's, because I didn't have a TV, and we were in Chuck's room watching it live. And what was shocking to me is I'm a huge space freak. So, I built models of the Challenge. I built models of the shuttle, and certainly was very aware of how it worked. And when it happened, I knew exactly what had happened, but they didn't know. you had all these commentators on TV not understanding what happened, but when you saw the boosters go off, I mean, it was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen, because up to that point, we'd never had a manned spaceflight disaster like that when it was in the air flying. We'd had, of course, the Apollo fires and things like that.
Yeah, that was on the launch pad.
And Apollo 13 obviously came back, but
Mhm.
watching that was just horrific. And I was so beside. I couldn't believe it.
It was when I finally, like years later, when I was working at a research assistant, when I was there and I got to talk to some of the NASA engineers who were present, when all that happened. And one of them over in the vehicle assembly building, he's like, come on, I'm going to show you something. He goes over, the solid rocket booster is disassembled, and he's showing me the O-rings, and he's showing me the redesign that they did for it. And just seeing that, I'm just like, wow, that was just an interesting time to be there and to see all that and have people tell you what happened and all the salvage, operations that they had to go and pull all that stuff back. And not to depress anybody, but at the same time, it was to hear those stories. They are sad, but then you hear how proud these people are of putting the space program back, on track, because they're like, we're going to take what we learned and we're not going to let this happen. So there's a bunch of other, fail safes and everything that they put in place, because of that.
Another thing that people forget about this privatization of space with SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic is how quickly they can move. Because they're privately funded, they don't have to wait for government oversight.
Mm-mm.
I mean, they have to follow plans, but you think NASA could ever build a booster rocket or a rocket like Blue Origin that goes up into space, drops off a capsule, and lands right where it took off from?
There's too much red tape.
That's insanity. I was watching that thing. It's just I never get tired of watching SpaceX or Blue Origin now land their boosters or land their rockets back to Earth. I mean, it's the most 50 sci-fi shit I've ever seen. I never get tired of it. I mean, it's like I used to watch movies like this when I was a little kid, and I'm like, that's never gonna, because we had these giant rockets like Saturn V's. They were cute, 300-foot tall rockets. I mean, the Blue Origin dildo is 60 feet high. I mean, it's like the first rocket made for OnlyFans. Thank you very much. It's amazing.
It's like, but it's functional, and it's that way for a reason. They get to think outside of the box, so you're not bounded by red tape. You're not bounded by, hey, this part of the country has to have a part of the space program because they're paying taxpayer dollars. So that's why we got to float this booster all the way from Louisiana by barge all the way around Florida to Cape Canaveral. It's like a waste. Why the heck do we have to do that at all? JJ, thank you so much for the $5 super chat and for being a member. Hi there, everyone. I love Trek, and it's great to talk about Trek when it was still great. Absolutely.
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Robert. I had a question with the whole space dildo thing. Do you think OnlyFans could actually get like their logo put on the side just to promote their stuff? Because we're eventually going to get to space.
I think if they pay enough, they probably will.
The little barcode on the side, you can scan it with your phone.
I'm just saying.
I want a cam girl to broadcast from orbit in zero gravity. You recreate the opening of Barbarella.
1 second.
Dang. All the stuff that it's like you grew up seeing. It's like, we can do this now.
No, and I think what's really interesting too is that they talk about like how modern Star Trek, we've actually heard the creators where Alex Kurtzman has even said that he wants to use Star Trek as a platform for his own agenda or for social commentary. And you look at the third season 2-parter here of Past Tense, that was great social commentary where you have an incredible idea of, okay, how are we going to help the homeless, which is one of the great problems of our day, especially in the United States.
Mhm.
And yet you wrap a time travel Star Trek story around it, and you do an effective job of telling all three of those stories. The idea of traveling through time, the idea of addressing the homeless issue, and then the idea of if you have to step up and take your place in history, which is what Cisco has to do, replacing Gabriel Bell. There's these three different, and then there's also Jadzia dealing with someone, a nice person in the 2020, in the year 2024. All of these stories were intertwined and very clever and very well written, very Star Trek. And they do exactly that, but they're not telling you what you should think. They're telling you what you should think about.
Exactly.
And that's a big difference. Modern Star Trek is all about beating you over the head about what you should think. That is not good storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's what modern Star Trek has become, and I don't understand why. You're either telling stories about villains that you're going to kill with phasers, or you're telling stories about where our main character, because she's a person of color in the 30th century, is going to be the savior of everyone, which also doesn't do anybody any favors either. And whereas talk about you have a woman, a black man, and a Muslim who are together saving the future in the 2-part episode past tense. It doesn't get any more diverse, and it doesn't get any more great than that. But you know what? You wouldn't see the characters on or the writers of Star Trek Deep Space Nine telling you how progressive these episodes are. Look at how progressive we are. Because that was inherent in the whole concept. And that's why Deep Space Nine was great.
It really was.
And they didn't have to tell you how great it was.
No, they would just put the story out there and let you make up your own mind. They didn't insult the audience. And even if you didn't get it, it's kind of like, you know what, you watch it again, you probably will eventually, get it. But they didn't lecture to you.
No, I mean, and if you really think about it, if you want to take it further, Jadzia Dax, who was the Dax symbiote, was transgender. So, I mean, let's go even further. And like in that episode, they're dealing with the homeless problem. You've got a transgender character, a Muslim character, and a black man. I mean, I'm sorry, but Discovery, you lose.
Completely.
And you have a great story, a great 2-parter to tell.
The best thing about this is, Robert, when we first started this whole show, and it was with season 1, the first thing you ever said is that Star Trek was made to make you think, not to, like, and as you said, not to tell you how to think. And when you're being told just what to think about, that embraces imagination. It embraces ideas. And that's what the whole show's pretense underlying was. It was to inspire imagination, that maybe that one person watching, whether it be TOS, Generation, Enterprise, DS9, that person there might have the idea of imagination that might solve homelessness. It might solve the eventuality of not having to have a sanctuary zone, and betterment at a step at a time. And no one watches Discovery for those reasons. No one watches Discovery, I guess, at all, unless you actually enjoy it. But it doesn't make you think. It's telling you where to stop thinking. And I don't think that's how we grow as a people. That's not how we grow as any type of evolution. It's a stalemate. You're telling them to become a Borg rather than Starfleet.
Yeah. Although I got to back up and say Deep Space Nine does have, season 3 of Deep Space Nine does have one of the worst episodes of Star Trek ever produced.
Which one?
Which one? I probably blanked it out.
Meridian.
Oh God.
See, Lorena, what a it's like their version of Brigadoon, and Jadzia is going to leave she's going to go live on a planet where every 100 years it pops up. I mean, oh my God, kill me now.
But
that had to be, I think that was the first DS9 episode out for season 3, where within the first 3 minutes, I'm like, no, I'm out.
Hold on.
I'm out.
I don't climb trees because I'm afraid I'll fall. Well, I won't let you fall. Oh my God, get a room. You're going to be gone in 60 years. That's the one thing that bothered me. Let's say they did have intimate relationships. Does the baby survive if they're off the island, or does it still have the whole quantum effect where it will disappear from a room for 60 years and come back as a 60-year-old baby and then ruin her?
I don't know, but I swear you talking about it. I think that's M. Night Shyamalan's premise for that movie, Old, but you didn't hear it from me.
But we get a saving grace though within the season, and honestly, that was with Fascination, I believe it was, where Roxana Troy is literally affecting people's horniness, and that's like it literally is about to turn into an intro to Pornhub, and it's fantastic. Jugzia is hitting on Benjamin Sisko, and Jake is going after Keanu Reeves. Then you got Shakar going after Dax. It's like, and at the end, you're getting Bashir and Nir and Kira like going full at it, making out, we gotta stop it, we can't pull each other away. And then Quark is going after Miles' wife. It's just, you just look at this going, this is like the human centipede of sexual attraction at this point. What's going on?
I think every episode is gonna have, every season is gonna have that stinker of an episode. It just seems to be what happens. But that one, that was not good.
There is a later episode question quickly for both of you. Do you think they tried to fix that episode when they had the later on episode where they discovered that planet that went through that time variance that pushed all of them back in the past and that colony was born? Do you think that was trying to fix in a different type of story the same type of pretense?
Maybe. I mean, look, the only thing good about Meridian is it's Jeffrey Combs' first appearance in Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
He plays a character, but it could be. I mean, Star Trek did recycle ideas, and
what was that one? Was it Through the Looking Glass? Which was the mirror episode?
Yeah, Through the Looking Glass.
Okay, yeah, it was that one, and it was kind of like we're really gonna go back there, huh? Okay. So it's kind of enjoyed it for what it was, but yeah, you could see it's like, they took the mirror universe and decided to do it in Deep Space Nine.
And I have to say, I didn't think they did it very well.
Neither did I.
I mean, what's really interesting to me is that this idea that the mirror universe where everybody is just flipped, we're just going to change people's nature. And I never thought it was way too, like when you go back and you watch the original Mirror, there's fun parts, but Spock is still very cool and calculating, and he's not some pirate going, rah, ha, ha, I'm a Vulcan pirate. He's a very, even though he's still the logical Spock, he's a very scary dude in that episode. And when like he says at one point, and my operatives would avenge me, and some of them are Vulcans. And it's just like, I don't want that. I don't want to run afoul of the Vulcans, your operative Spock. And I think one of the things that I think Star Trek is guilty of, modern Star Trek, is that it does get a little simplistic at times. Like the Klingons, I think if you go back and you look at the first appearance of the Klingons in the original series in Errand of Mercy, and you meet John Colicos's Kor, if you watch the relationship that develops between him and Kirk, who's undercover as Barona and Organian, they have a great relationship. And you really like Kor. He's not like, let me tell you about honor and let's drink blood wine. He's a tactician, and he's a really smart guy. And of course, they didn't have the way to do the makeups they had to do later with Star Trek the Motion Picture and onward to Next Generation. But the portrayal of the Klingons, they were very smart people. And they were more portrayed as the Russians, or I guess now the Chinese. But they were still, the Klingons, as seen in Next Generation, became very broad. And it was really Ron Moore that defined them more as Vikings. And that was pretty cool. But it was still, to me, modern Star Trek got a lot broader so people could understand, like the reason why Romulans always wore big collars or big shoulder pads, so you could go, oh, I see what they're wearing, that's a Romulan, as if they only dressed one way, and there was a lot of that in modern Star Trek that you have to forgive.
I have a question though when it came to this. Let's go into the mirror universe and a generalization. Kira Nerys, do you think she played a better mirror Kira or normal universe Kira? Which one do you think she played better as?
I think that she's a really good actress, and I think she was underserved a lot by the way Kira was written, because she's always like angry, and I think she needed a little bit more of the spiritual side of Bajor in her. And what was so great about seeing her as the intendant Kira was how much fun she was having chewing the scenery. I mean,
Oh,
she was
yeah.
that was Nana Visitor. I mean, there was something when I first saw Nana Visitor, I was like, I mean, obviously she had a smoking hot bod, but her haircut was like, what is this? Like they never, but when you saw her as attendant Kira, and if you see her now, she's like in her 60s with her white hair, that woman exudes sexuality. I mean, she is so hot, and the way she is just seems so much fun. It wasn't until she got to play the attendant where you're like, okay, here she is finally unleashed. And that was one of the things she was delicious as this prancing villainous, she was having so much fun. I mean, and obviously very different from her persona, but I never liked the way Kira was written. I mean, it was interesting when she was with Vedic Barile, and she clearly had a sexual side to her, but I know she was supposed to be this angry freedom fighter that had been fighting for Bajor, but I would like to have seen them delving into her spiritual side a little bit more, not just when she was getting busy with Barile or going toe to toe with Kai Wynn.
I think for me, it started at some points. It started to get really old, as it's just like we know. Yeah, Kira's a freedom fighter. Yeah. She's got a chip on her shoulder, obviously from what she went through, and it seems like they kind of started to overuse that to the point where I didn't really care about that particular part. It's kind of like you were saying, it would have been more interesting seeing her more spiritual side, to her. I liked how she interacted with that, with Vedic Barile, seeing how she interacted with her castmates. It seemed like a trope, the angry freedom fighter trope, which that could work for like 1 season, 2 seasons, but they kind of seem to keep going back to that. Which, I know she's still fun.
I think I think that, in her 60s, she still looks amazing. I think that was a problem with modern Star Trek in general. They tended to write characters as archetypes as opposed to real people. And I think that really changed. We saw programming, television became more sophisticated. When you get to Battlestar Galactica, for instance, obviously Ron Moore had a big part of the writing staff of DS9, but they really, on Battlestar Galactica, they took it to another level, and I would say that Starbuck was Kira. Starbuck was an evolution of Katie Sackhoff's, who also was grappling with the spirituality of what was going on, literally to the point where she died and was reincarnated as one of God's angels, and so I think what Ron Moore, I've never asked him this. I didn't ask him this when we were doing the documentaries for TNG, but I've always been curious. Is Starbuck the representation of Kira, who also evolved to embrace her spiritual side and indeed evolved to the point where she became part of the prophets? Like, in a way, they wrote Starbuck as the emissary.
Yeah.
But again, I've never seen this really addressed.
Okay. And then one question, why do you think in those incarnation of Trek, they kind of were sticking with archetypes? Do you think they didn't want to take any risks at that particular time?
I think that they didn't, they were writing, having spent time with Rick Berman doing those documentaries, I think he still felt, and he was the person who really set the tone after Roddenberry passed away. I think that in his mind, there was still a certain pulp element in science fiction. And with all the makeups and all the sets and the special effects, that he felt in his mind that the audience needed to have it to be a little bit more simplistic than, say, your average episode of Saint Elsewhere or something. Even though I don't believe that, but I think he might have. So we get a lot of very, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but we really always know who we're dealing with. There was not a lot of ambiguity in the characters, although that ambiguity grew in the latter seasons of Deep Space Nine. And when that writing staff took over and really could go where they wanted to go, I thought the characterizations became far more sophisticated. Look at someone like Damar, you know, or even the Wayoons, and even Salome Jens is the founder leader. I mean, they did a lot more of that, and then the characters got far more nuanced, and which I loved. So,
a script doctor says you can start with archetypes, but you have to grow the characters into their own as the story progresses. And Michael Asylum said archetypes are what general audiences and networks understand.
no, it's true. I mean, Star Trek: The Next Generation, the characters did very little growth. They were pretty much the same when you met them as when the show ended with All Good Things 7 years later. This show, Deep Space Nine, really let the characters grow and change. And I thought that was, especially like Worf. I mean, Michael Dorn was given a great role as Worf in Deep Space Nine, way more than he ever was in
Next Gen. Yeah.
And the what he got to do was amazing. And Dr. Bashir, another character that was really kind of annoying when he started, but they really wrote him well. And the relationship that he developed with O'Brien. I mean, what's amazing about Deep Space Nine is it took this almost a day player in O'Brien he was on Next Generation since the pilot, you know, this recurring role, and they turned him into this great character, gave him Keiko, his wife, and a daughter, and yet he was an integral part of that cast. And of course, he went on and is one of our great character actors. But that was a really cool thing that they did, taking this, and you know, we've talked about how Kira was supposed to be Ro Laren, but she didn't want to do it. And I think even Kira did go through a lot of evolution as well. So it's good. I mean, by the time you get to, it's funny. I think a lot of people now, they hear people waxing rhapsodic about Deep Space Nine, but you got to get through the first 3 seasons, and yet you need the. Yeah,
you do. It's like you need them, because when I dropped in for good around season 3, it's like the further episodes, like, okay, I'm missing this part, I'm missing that part, I'm missing, you know, this part, so I need to go back. And yeah, some of them kind of suffer through, but yeah, you really did have to do that. Oh, sorry, dear Mark. What did you up here? She says, as a viewer, I saw Kira's struggles with moral values and her personal growth. I understood why she earned her place as major, later becomes colonel of the Bajor militia, and her value to Starfleet.
Yep.
I thought one of the evolutions that I did like about Kira was she went from, you know, we don't need Starfleet here, to evolving to the point where it's kind of just like, okay, there are some reasons that we do still need to have, you know, Starfleet around, even though they do crap that I don't agree with. Like, and I'm forgetting the name of the episode, but with Odo, and she's trying to tell, you know, Cisco basically that, you know, why are you letting this happen? He's like, well, Starfleet likes team players, and Odo's not a team player. And she's basically saying, well, you need to make him see that. And he says, you know, Odo has to, he's basically, you know, he's got Odo's back, but he has to want to be here.
Right. Yeah. And we have to talk about Improbable Cause and the Dias Cast, the 2-parter where they go after the Dominion. I mean, you've got the that's when the Obsidian Order and the Tal Shiar team up. You have an Abrantane, Paul Dooley's character, that has a connection to Garrick, who turns out to be his father. You know, but one of the more epic, I mean, in terms of special, we'd never seen battles or special effects in a Star Trek TV show the way we did in the Dias Cast. It predated First Contact, the opening of First Contact, by a year. I mean, my God, that 2-part episode, how it starts out and just becomes just monstrously huge when you've got the Cardassians and the Romulan fleet going out to find the founders, and they think they found the founder homeworld, and oh man. And you've got Garrick, who really got moved to the forefront. I mean, Andrew Robinson was obviously a MVP of that show, but my God, it starts out with somebody bombs Garrick's shop, and it winds up with this massive fleet of ships being destroyed by the Dominion. I mean, it was fucking awesome.
You can't tell me seeing Cardassian Kelvin class with cloaking devices wasn't awesome.
It was awesome. I mean that and the Warbirds, that were introduced in the end of the first season of TNG. That was it was awesome. That two-parter, I was like, wow. I mean, that was, the best of both worlds. People talk about the best of both worlds, and best of both worlds 1 is amazing. And especially when you're watching best of both worlds 2 is fine. But Improbable Cause and the Die is Cast, I mean, that was a two-parter, man. And you're like, whoa. I mean, this went into territory that you hadn't seen in Star Trek before. Strange bedfellows with the Cardassians and the Romulans. And you're like, wait a minute, aren't you our friends? Because you gave us the cloaking device, and what's going on here? And man. But then it's funny because then there's another episode of Deep Space Nine that follows that episode that I really like, which is Explorers. And it's a great episode where, again, lest you forget, we have our single father and his son, and Ben Sisko builds an old Bajoran spacefaring sailing ship to go prove this theory about early space travel. And right after the Die is Cast, and then you go do Explorers, and it's a wonderful episode. Again, a character story about Sisko and Jake, and that was really neat.
That was really cool. Oh, go ahead, Bessie.
I apologize. I think my favorite part is when he's asking, "How many ships are there, Lieutenant? How many ships are there?" 101 Gem Hadar fighters, and it's just right then there. It's sudden death. And you see the friendship. This is actually where the friendship with Garrick and Odo starts spouting, right? Because Garrick starts showing his heart side. He doesn't want to torture Odo, but he doesn't want anyone else doing it for him. And eventually you hear that line, "Tell me something, tell me a lie, anything to tell me."
Oh, Fat Steven yeeted himself.
Tell me a lie. Tell me a lie.
He'll be back. Oh my God. I forgot to say, it's like 42 of you guys watching. Thank you so very much. Robert Meyer Burnett is our guest, and we are talking Deep Space Nine.
Well, it's so funny because all I do is bitch and moan and complain on my channel about modern Star Trek. So it's always a pleasure to come, wax rhapsodic with the two of you about how great Star Trek was and how much fun, it really was at the time.
Well, one episode that I wanted to talk about, and one that I completely forgotten that I liked, was the one with Bashir, and it's like he's aging, and different members of Deep Space Nine represent different parts of his personality. I thought that was one of the most inventive episodes, and it actually made me like Julian Bashir, because I really did not like him at all in the beginning. I didn't. I just didn't like him. It's like, dude, you're just thirsty. You try too hard. It's, forget that. But that episode kept me guessing.
Was that Distant Voices?
Yes.
That's when we got attacked with a bioneric gel within his in the med bay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wakes up and he's all alone, and yeah.
And he's like aging, and I think at one point he actually told O'Brien, I like the old O'Brien better.
Right.
But it was cool. It's just the way that they wrote it. And he was like so focused on, I got to get the ops to fight this. And it turns out all along his power was in the infirmary. That.
I'll tell you, along those lines, I really like Life Support, the Vedic Bareil episode when they're trying to. I thought that
one
that packed an emotional wallop. Vedic Bareil, who I love that. I really like Vedic Bareil.
I did too.
He had that actor was really great. He had this real. I believed he was a religious leader. That he had a serenity to him.
Yeah,
and that was heartbreaking, man. Like they couldn't save him. And he was out. He was gone, and that was heartbreaking, man.
That ranks up there with and I'm blanking out on the Next Gen episode where they had like the all the brand new ensigns, and the story was being told from their point of view. So it was like things they couldn't talk about.
Was that Lower Decks? And there you had Ensign Sito, who went on the mission.
Yes.
And yeah.
And they brought in, a Kardashian. It's like, you have to, pretend to be his prisoner. And she's like, I know what Kardashians do to their prisoners. And at the end, she didn't come back.
No, man, that was hardcore.
That was, I did not expect for that to happen.
And what do we get anyway? We get the same. We get a series called Lower Decks, and everybody's a comedian and drinking on the ships, and
that's so disrespectful.
Let's throw in another Star Trek reference and show how cool we are.
Oh yeah, that was, because that just like it made the danger of being in Starfleet freaking real.
Yeah, I mean, and she was such a great character. They build up Ensign Sito as this great character when she gets brought in by Picard to go on the secret mission and all that. And then they killed her.
Yeah.
I mean, that was hardcore. You're like, oh my God.
She was also related to the episode with the whole death of Wes's friend during the flight maneuvers when they were testing the maneuver they weren't supposed to.
That's where she was introduced in the first duty in season 5. Where they introduced Tom Paris, even though they couldn't say he was Tom Paris.
Yeah.
Robert Duncan McNeil. It was, again, it was so weird because if they had made him the same character on Voyager, if Tom Paris was if Nick Locarno was then ported over to Voyager, the character, I don't remember who wrote the first duty. Was it wrong? I don't know who. They would have had to get character payments for every episode of Voyager. So that's why they couldn't call Nick Locarno. That's why Tom Paris is not Nick Locarno, even though his backstory is entirely the same. They didn't even change it.
Right.
He winds up in the stockade in like New Zealand.
But it's actually brilliant though, Robert. If we think about it, maybe that was the whole intention. Maybe the fact is he did something so horrible within the Federation lines is that not only that's why he's at that camp where Janeway first picks him up, he has to take a new name.
Mm-hmm.
That could be.
It could be. Yeah.
I mean, they just couldn't. They just couldn't say it. Yeah. And I always thought, look, I understand the realities of television. Like if you're a WJ writer and you create a character that then they spin off into another show, you get a lot of money. So I get it. And for 7 years, that might have been the most lucrative. Actually, now I want to know who wrote the first duty. Let's find out. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't.
Well, you look at that for a minute. Well, the Wake Down says, I've heard rumors Alexander Siddig wasn't the most popular guy on the set, and he wasn't all that happy when they retconned Bashir's character to make him genetically enhanced. I don't know about the second part. About Alexander not being the most popular. I don't know. The couple times that I ran into him on set, he was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard anything, but you never know. By the way, it was Ron Moore and Naren Shankar that wrote that episode. So, they were. That kind of sucks that they didn't. I guess they would have had like co-creator credit or something, and nobody wants that. To give that up.
Well, so I wanted to ask another thing, if that's okay. What were your guys' thoughts on the whole the adversary? Where we actually see the first time ever, I think, a changeling actually harms to the point of murders another changeling. And how do you think that affected Odo on a level where he is then becoming an outcast later on? I'm not going to spoil too much, but that was like a shift to change for his character.
I thought that was really good because you had to see the adversary. For those of you who don't know, is the whatchamacallit? It's the the climax of season 3. And I thought that was really, again, that upped the stakes. It upped the stakes with what was actually going on at the time, and both through a character and through the situation. So, and they introduced the Zenkethi. Yep. Zenkethi, is that how you say it? Who was, I always liked that. What a cool name. But and I believe that they've even referenced the Zenkethi on Lower Decks, because hey, why wouldn't you on that
and Enterprise
show? And Enterprise.
Yeah.
I've forgotten who they were.
Yep.
Badasses.
Yeah, Odo does go through so much character development. It's great. I love the episode where you finally meet the founders, and he finally meets, his people, and it's kind of like idealized when he meets them, and then finds out, guess who these guys are? They're the founders with their enforcers, the Jem'Hadar. That just like blew my mind. But
Well,
just seeing him, go through that.
Nebula.
and it was a big deal because like when Odo kills the changeling in the adversary, he's the first changeling to kill another changeling, and from the changeling's perspective, that pretty much is a statement of which side are you on, buddy?
Right.
And I think from then on, Odo inadvertently, he's trying to defend his one of the great things. I think another thing that we got to talk about first of all is Rene Auberjonois was amazing. Absolutely amazing in this show, and he goes through an amazing change because he doesn't know who he is or where he came from, and part of what he's experiencing in Deep Space Nine is learning about who he is and the fact that he's constantly he doesn't identify with the changelings, and he doesn't remember, and he truly is a member of Starfleet. But what I love about him is he's kind of this curmudgeonly guy. I mean, he's an amazing character, and by at the end of the adversary, we realize that he's become changeling enemy number one. So not only do the changelings distrust solids, there's a changeling amongst them that the Dominion is going to go after. Like he becomes a huge target.
I just wanted to show you guys this before I forget. I found this.
I hate you so much.
In my you're really gonna hate me in a couple of weeks.
I know. I'm gonna hate you a lot more. I already hate it, but it's hate with love. Like when you want to eat the cupcake frosting first, it's really bad.
It's like when you see people with the hot toys. It's like, yeah,
there it is.
That one.
But there it is. That's the episode I was talking about the relation of trying to do the Band-Aid, right? The bottom left with Worf and the ascendance of Worf. There it is in that picture. That's awesome. Damn.
Yeah. I'm not even going to show you the other part to that one. This was back in the day when I could go on the Paramount set and like get press kits and stuff like that.
Rob, can I ask you a question though, quickly?
Yes, sir.
Was it season 3 or season 4 that Odo became an actual Federation agent? Because I know he was technically the Bajoran constable. When does he actually?
Oh, that's a good. I don't remember. That's a good question. I don't.
I thought it was 4 when the war started, when they actually were in the depths of war, that he finally became.
That might be
human. I don't know.
True. That might be. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, what was really interesting was what I love about the adversary is it sets up what happens in Purgatory's Shadow and by Inferno's Light. The idea of the Dominion is replacing people, taking the real people, and then coming up with this, creating these bullshit stories that aren't true, and the level of manipulation they're going through to it. Really, by the end of the adversary, you're completely paranoid about the Star Trek universe because no one is who they appear. Perhaps no one is who they appear to be. And when that the changeling before he dies says, it's too late, we're everywhere.
Yeah.
And while while it doesn't have the impact of a galaxy starship blowing up like at the end of the Jem'Hadar, you still have that unbelievable paranoia. And that was one of the great things that, like, the Dominion didn't have the numbers. That's why it was like, we're going to build a coalition in the Alpha Quadrant. We're going to get the Breen, and we're going to get the Cardassians and all these allies to fight for us, because we don't need to bring there's not enough of us to come en masse. So we're going to build a coalition, and we're going to screw with you. I mean, later on when we talk about Paradise Lost and Homefront, there's only 3 changelings on Earth, and we made all that happen. Yeah.
And even we get the Klingon homeworld too. I can't wait for that as well. We're getting the but you're right on that. Yeah, you're too late. We're everywhere. That is like a subtense for most horror and thriller films, because it's eventually saying no longer can you trust your neighbor.
Nope.
You don't know when you're, but that's the one thing that bothers me. And I'm going to go a little far in the head. When Julian is actually in the future is found out to be not who he says he is, I still get confused on when the switch happened.
Right. Well, it probably happened. We didn't know. We don't know.
Oh.
Because we didn't see every day of everyone's lives. We only saw a little bit of everybody's lives.
But that's crazy. Oh man, God, I love DS9.
I just thought that was just so profound when they said that. It's like we are everywhere. I'm like, dang.
God.
Man, I freaking love this show. Oh my gosh, 45 of you guys watching. Thank you so very, very much. Man, this season, like I said, this was the season that just like cemented my love for the show. They even had like the side moments like Jake dating a Dabo girl older than him.
Oh yeah,
I don't care.
good on Jake,
You know
by the way.
that?
I don't care. She was beautiful and she was nice. She was welcoming. Even the fact where the dad went behind his back to invite her to dinner. It's just you don't see that family kind of involvement anymore. Where literally the dad will step out of the way to get to know who the son is dating, just because he's interested in his life to make sure, in a way, he's protecting.
Plus, I love the idea that again, Deep Space Nine is dealing with a prejudice against her.
Yes.
Because of her vocation.
Mhm.
You know, she might as well be a sex worker or something. And now they couldn't, that would have been a little too progressive for Deep Space Nine at the time, but it's basically that.
Yeah,
She's a
it's the same
Vegas show,
analogy. Exactly.
you know, she's a Vegas showgirl, and the idea that can't and you're the familial prejudice, the father's like, aren't you a little better than a Dabo girl? Come on, dude. And that was a recurring thing that didn't just happen as a one-off.
No,
You know,
that was the prejudice that you saw throughout the show. Like, oh, you're a Dabo girl, you know.
Yeah, and you got that with Chase Masterson, with Lita, and they were always doing that. And I like that. And that was that. I mean, they kind of stealthily said, this is, I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on in Deep Space Nine that they didn't address overtly, like the Hollow Suites.
Yeah, no refunds.
Yeah,
Major Kira with Quark's head. Come on, you can't tell me that was good.
Yeah, no, that was, but they went there. I mean, the idea that you have people are going to Hollow Suites to have sex. You know, they dealt with that more overtly in the Orville, but
oh Lord, I freaking love the Orville. Oh, hold on one second. Roger H, thank you so much for the $1.99 Canadian super sticker. Of course, a thumbs up. So
Roger H is the man.
Yes.
Yeah. There was also a subtext. This actually, I think this was the introduction to where they started broadbanding Jake as a writer, and it was when the Damo girl actually mentioned that he wrote poetry, and I think that was the birthplace of his writing, because I don't think it was mentioned as much or any at all in the previous seasons, because he was not mature enough to be given another type of quality.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I really like that. Like, Jake became a war correspondent. You know, and that was really cool that they developed. You know, it was so interesting because, first of all, like Jake's relationship with his father was great, but also Jake's relationship with Nog, the way that developed was great.
I love that, because Nog wanted. I'm sorry, Mira. It's like Nog really wanted to go into Starfleet, and he couldn't understand why Jake didn't want to go into Starfleet.
Yeah, one of the things that has really disappointed me in Star Trek Discovery, for all their talk about, progressiveness, they've segregated their characters. You know, like, here are the gay transgender kids. They have their storylines, and here's the beautiful black woman and her beautiful black boyfriend, and they're over here. You know, there's all this weird segregation going on, and you'd think that there wouldn't be any of that. I'm surprised that we haven't seen all the characters in modern Star Trek have relationships with one another. And I don't mean sexual or romantic relationships. I mean interpersonal relationships. And they don't. It's bizarre. And one of the things that I love about Deep Space Nine is all these characters. Sure, you had people that partnered up as like best friends, like O'Brien and Bashir, but they would do episodes where everybody interacted with everybody else. And I thought that was a really important thing to do for the show.
Like the ubiquitous ensemble episode where it's everybody is involved on some kind of scale. And those were some of my favorite ones, where you got everyone together and everyone had something to do. And especially those characters that I call them like the B characters, they didn't get as much screen time, but in these ensemble pieces, usually they kind of did things to bring them more to the forefront.
I think they forgot this most simplest thing. Starships, any type of starship has a huge complement of crew, whether it be civilians in transport, ambassadors, emissaries, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they forgot one thing. It's still like a subway or a public bus transit. You're eventually going to have an interaction with someone, whether they touch your hand by accident, have to get by you, and that is in itself interactions. They don't even do the simplest forms. And it's to the point now, if you look at it, Morn is better written than all of Kurtzman's stuff put together. And he doesn't talk at all. And Morn is better written as a silent character, if you're thinking about it.
Just the dialogue, not the dialogue, but the way that he didn't talk, but everyone else talked about him.
Mm-hmm. I miss it.
Yep.
That's a good point.
I'm a dork. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're all dorks for this stuff, dude.
There's one thing another thing I wanted to ask though. Every time we get an episode in a season with Alexander Troy, do you automatically get the feeling in the back of your head or your hair in the neck stands up? You're like, okay, we're gonna have one of these weird kind of outspoken, crazy episodes that's gonna happen. And she seems to have that effect as soon as you see her on screen. It's like it's continued from generation.
I liked Loxana Troy. I think she was just so freaking over the top. Because she reminds me of one of my relatives, one of like the most colorful relatives in the family. It's like, when they come around, it's not really a party until they show up. But the episode, I want to say, it wasn't season, God, that's a shame I'm blanking out, but where she's trapped in the turbolift with Odo. And Odo has to revert back to his liquid form, and he doesn't want to because he doesn't want her to see him that way. And then she takes her wig off, and she's just like, she's like, this is how I really look, and I'm ordinary. She's like, without it, I just look ordinary. To kind of just bond with Odo, and I thought that was a really, really touching. I thought it was a touching moment. Yeah, she's a fun character. Such thoughts about me, Jean-Luc.
Oh God, the Shakespeare episode from PNG. Oh God.
Why do I feel like I've wiped my brain of that one for a reason?
The one where he's trying to get Loxana back from, I think, the Ferengi, and he's literally going, Alexa, I have nothing without you. You need to come back, and trying to unspout fake, undying love for her. You can see Picard himself clenching his teeth, going, I could really use an enema right now. I'm not going to do this.
Yes, that's right. She was also the voice of the ship's computer. Mm-hmm. She sure was. As usual, time flies way too fast.
It's a long, yes.
Way too fast. We're way too fast with these. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be back, for season 4. So
when we get into it, I mean, what a season opener season 4 has.
It's like if you thought 3, and I love how they just kept stepping up. If you thought season 3 started off crazy. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's funny because, the thing about Deep Space Nine is it was struggling in the ratings. They kept trying to do different things and they found a very novel idea. For those of you who might not have ever seen Deep Space Nine, something very epic. They ported over a character. And at first I thought it was going to be a gimmick. It started out as a gimmick and then it became one of the most valuable things they ever did on the show.
And it was one of those things where when you run a fan club for a certain character and a certain actor who happens to be the captain, the kind of stuff that you started hearing when this was going down. I'm just like, I really can't talk about it right now. We'll talk about it soon enough, but I can't talk about it right now. And it was crazy. I was like, is this really going to happen?
I can't even imagine what that was like too.
It was a very interesting time.
I can't wait to hear about it from your perspective.
Oh, well, this is going to be awesome. So thank you guys so much. And thank you, Robert, for joining us.
Oh, man, this is my treat. Thank you for having me. My God.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome. You're welcome.
So much.
I love coming on with you two. It's great.
Oh, well, you
Hi,
know
my
what?
friend.
Actually, we have to get you on with Chris
Chris
Gore.
Gore.
Oh, well, I've known him for over 30 years. I love Chris.
Yeah, so he's kind of like, well, I don't know if anybody wants to see me at a live show. I'm like, dude, yeah.
Oh,
We do.
we'd
Yeah,
have
we
a
do.
blast. Oh,
Yeah, we do.
We'd talk for 3 hours.
So we said, yeah, we're gonna have to get you and Robert on, and we're just gonna have to live stream and do it that way.
Oh, that'd be great.
While building
thank
models.
you. Yeah,
While
oh
building
Lord,
models, Robert. You
wow,
gotta
but,
start building those models while doing that.
it's gonna be.
I'm gonna do that. I mean, all of it, like this. I mean, I can't wait to. I haven't delved into this. My perfect grade RX-78. I mean, I love perfect grade Gundams, but this is the perfect grade Unleashed. This is a whole nother.
Okay,
level.
Do you
oh
accept wedding
man,
proposals?
I do not.
What if I was dressed like Barbarella?
We might have something there.
All right, I'll work on my figure.
If you're in zero gravity, it'd be even better. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, because you didn't have to worry about holding anything up.
Well, Michael Asylum, yes, we are going to have more Deep Space Nine streams. So, just keep an eye out for when it's announced. We usually do this like about once a month. So folks start
we have to do 4 more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got to do 4 more.
We're not even halfway through yet.
Yeah, got to do that. And, more fandom stash, because there's so much stuff I have in here, man. It's just amazing. And it's great to be able to share with all of you guys. Okay, well, folks, thank you so very much for coming. And again, Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
folks,
thanks for having me.
If you're watching, absolutely not a problem. So, folks, please do share this video, subscribe to everyone on the channel, on the panel. Of course, we have Rob's social media information, so you can subscribe, to his YouTube, and of course, follow him on Twitter and all of that. All right, folks. Okay, so we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Live long and prosper.
There we go. Yeah, I got that.
It's too late. We're everywhere.